I appreciate you tuning in again. Thank you very much. The last time we were here, we spent some time talking about work files. We're going to continue on that because it's so important to have the right stuff in the work file so that we can avoid a lot of problems with state boards, with courts, with opposing counsel, with upset clients, etc. So we're going to talk more about what should be in the work file. Now, we're not going to say, well, you need to have an A and a B and a C and a D, because quite frankly, everything is different. But the point is, and let me quote Josh Wallet here, if you see it, save it. If you use it, save it. Because that way, if somebody says, well, how did you come up with that adjustment? It's in the work file. Now, let's talk about what's going to happen when you hear from the state. Now, your first letter from the state will be, please send us your work file and your report. That's fine. You're going to send those in. You have to. You don't have any choice. Now, you're not going to send in anything but those. And you're going to say, gosh, state, here's the stuff you're looking for. Thank you for this opportunity, and drop it. Again, you're not going to be defending yourself because this is not the place to do that. That's going to come later on. Now, one of the things that you're going to find is the letter from the state will contain, well, it's going to say, we want you to explain 5 or 6 or 27 things to us, whatever. You're going to notice that almost all of those requests will start out from your work file. In other words, the sentence will say something along the lines of, you made an 8% per year upward time adjustments to 2 of the 4 comparable sales. From your work file, please show us how you determined that only 2 of the 4 comparable sales merited an 8% per year time adjustment. And then from your work file, please show us the derivation of the 8%. Now, this is bringing home something that we don't do real well in appraisal training. We just assume that if there's a difference between a subject and a comp, there's got to be an adjustment. Not so. The market has to tell us there's an adjustment. Otherwise, it's not a market-supported adjustment. Support does not solely mean 8% or 3% or $48 a square foot. Support also means, yes, the market recognizes a difference. Therefore, if the market doesn't recognize a difference, don't make the adjustment. If it does recognize the difference, then extract the adjustment from the market. Now, we're going to get into some of the ramifications of this in a second. So what the state is looking for out of your work file, what the court is looking for out of your work file, what we have got to be able to show out of our work file in order to defend ourselves in this particular example is the fact that, yes, I looked at 27 sales, and it was obvious that in 24 of them, there was a difference solely and only attributable to square footage differences, or solely and only attributable to the date of sale versus the effective date of the appraisal, or solely and only due to a view of the mountains versus a view of nothing. Once we have that narrowed down, once we have isolated that variable, then we go back a second time and we say, okay, it's clear that my subject has a view and this particular comp does not, and the market is recognizing a view. Now, so I've isolated that there's going to be an adjustment. Now I've got to isolate the quantity of the adjustment. That's as challenging as figuring out if there's an adjustment due in the first place. But we're not going to get into that one here, since there are many ways to figure out how to calculate the adjustment. Let's look first rather into, is there even a need for an adjustment? Now, because a view has as much to do with the site as anything else, what you're going to do is take a look at the sales of vacant sites. And you're going to have to get on Google Earth or talk to the broker or somebody and say, this site had a beautiful view of the mountains or a beautiful view of the golf course or whatever. Was there a premium for that? And the broker will say, oh, yeah. Or no, all the lots in there have a view of something, a golf course, a lake, the mountains, something. So I couldn't isolate any difference. Well, unless we're appraising in the self-same neighborhood, we're going to have to isolate a difference. So as a result, we might not be able to isolate purely a mountain view, but we can isolate a premium view. Or what if you see a whole lot of the golf course? How are you going to distinguish between that view? That's, quite frankly, where we get into the art of real estate appraisal. If the property is under contract, that's going to be a lot easier than if it isn't, because the contract will contain the premium for that itty-bitty golf course view or that great big golf course view. Otherwise, it takes a lot of research to look for sales with itty-bitty golf course views versus great big golf course views. The point is, we've got to be able to show from the work file the analyses we went through in order to justify the premium or the extra value per square foot or the extra value of the pool or whatever. We've got to be able to show that from the work file. So the state wants to say, well, yeah, I looked at 10 sales with swimming pools and I looked at 10 sales without swimming pools, and the average difference was $17,000. The median difference was $15,800, and the most common difference was $12,700. Okay, and then from that range, from that $12,700 to the whatever it is I said was the high one, then we've got to come up with an adjustment, and that's a judgment call, quite frankly. You know, we've got a really basic square or rectangular pool. It's probably not going to have much of a premium, whereas we've got a really complex pool with a lot of extra stuff. Okay, maybe we go to the higher end of the premium. But the point is, we didn't just assume that because there was a pool, there was a premium. We were able to show it out of the market. And of course, one of the easiest ways to do that is pairing of grouped sales. Otherwise, to say, well, a pool costs so much is very straightforward. And it's relatively simple to calculate. But what we're looking at is, okay, yeah, it costs more to put in a pool, but is that a premium the market is recognizing? And if it is, it's a premium. We have to be able to show the state out of the work file. And we have to be able to say, well, here's a comparison A versus comparison B, and that comparison of properties with pools and properties without pools showed us, number one, that properties with pools did have a premium, and number two, the amount of the premium. Now, let's wrap this up. What we're doing is we're getting now into the mechanics of appraisal, which is just fine. But what happens is a lot of appraisers are saying, well, you know, for the crummy fee I got for this appraisal, the AMC wouldn't pay me a decent fee. So for the crummy fee I got for this appraisal, I can't do that much work. Okay, please understand, I agree with you. If your fee's crummy, then you're right. You probably can't do that much work. But remember, if the fee's crummy, it's because you negotiated a crummy fee. And if the AMC would only pay you X, but you obviously felt the job was worth 200% of X, and you didn't negotiate for it, then the crummy fee is your fault, not the AMC's fault. And then the state doesn't care about your fee. The state says you signed certification 2-3, which says you You followed, you understood USPAP, you followed USPAP, you were competent to do the job right when you took it. It doesn't say anything about the fee. So the state is going to look at a number of things. It's going to look at your work file. It's going to look at the derivation, number one, of the need for an adjustment, and the derivation, number two, of the actual amount of the adjustment. And then it's going to look and say, all right, did you do the job your client hired you to do? And the fee, notwithstanding, doesn't set your scope of work. The quality, the complexity of the assignment, your own integrity sets the scope of work. So please, as you go through with your appraisals, remember, out of the work file, you have to be able to show the state, number one, that an adjustment was necessary, and number two, the quantity of the adjustment is one the market supports. So we'll be talking more about this. I appreciate your time. Thank you. I'm Tim Andersen, the Appraiser's Advocate. It will be a pleasure to work with you. Please get in touch with me, Tim, at theappraisersadvocate.com. And thank you so much. My best to you and all of yours.